So, ready to take this deep dive into Brené Brown and wholehearted living. Her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, really resonated with me.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what makes Brown's work so unique? It's not just theory. She actually spent years, literal years, interviewing people and like really delving into these experiences, with shame and vulnerability and what it actually means to live, a good life, a whole life. I think that's why it resonates with so many people.
Yeah, she gives a voice to all those things that we don't always talk about. And in this book, she's giving us kind of like this roadmap, right? With these guideposts to help us get to that wholehearted way of being.
Yeah, she maps out like 10 guideposts. And what's interesting, even in the excerpts you pulled out, is how she tackles these big topics like love, belonging, authenticity.
Yeah.
She actually had to redefine them based on her research because she's like, the traditional definitions just don't cut it.
I thought that was so interesting going through the material because it's like we think we know these words, love, belonging, authenticity, but she really makes you kind of rethink them,
Yeah.
Go a little deeper.
Yeah.
And it's in that going deeper that like you unlock something more maybe.
Absolutely. And one of her, I think, most compelling arguments in all of this is that self-love and self-acceptance aren't like a nice thing to have. They're essential. Like those are essential ingredients to connect with other people in a real way.
So interesting because you would think, right, that to connect with other people, you have to like focus outward. But she's saying, no, it starts with how you connect with yourself.
Yes. Recognizing your own worthiness.
Yeah.
First and foremost. And that ties into one of the guideposts I think resonated with you. Cultivating authenticity, right? Letting go of what people think.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Having the courage to be yourself, even when it's scary. And I loved that anecdote, the story she told about getting that really, really harsh email.
Oh, yeah.
And how tempting it would be to fire back, but she chose a different path.
It's the perfect illustration of what she calls shame resilience. Instead of reacting with anger, which she says is her like go-to, she chose vulnerability and just acknowledged the hurt. And I think that is so powerful.
Instead of going into that shame cycle. And speaking of shame, that's a big part of this book, right?
Huge. It's a huge part.
Yeah.
She does not shy away from it at all. In fact, she spends a good chunk of it like unraveling how shame impacts our lives.
Right.
And one of the ways she argues that we can combat that shame is through vulnerability, reaching out, connecting with other people.
And she shares her own story about that, right? When she felt like a failure for not being able to come up with this research topic.
Yes. Even Brené Brown feels this.
You all feel this way, yeah.
Exactly.
But it's how she responds, right? That's the key difference.
Yes.
She doesn't let it fester. She calls her husband.
Exactly. And that's like the turning point in that whole story for her is that conversation, right? Because she's opening up and sharing that experience. And through that process, she's able to move through that shame. It's such a testament to the power of connection, even in those like really raw, vulnerable moments.
You don't have to go through it alone.
You do not have to go through it alone. It's interesting how she ties that into another guidepost.
Okay.
Cultivating gratitude and joy. Letting go of scarcity and fear of the dark.
Okay, I didn't put that together, but yeah. When you're in that cycle of shame and fear, it's almost impossible to feel grateful.
Yeah.
Like those emotions can't exist in the same space.
It's true. And one of the things she points out is this fascinating connection between anxiety and scarcity. So when we're anxious, we tend to fixate on what we lack, what's missing, what could go wrong.
And that just brings more anxiety, and then you feel even more scared. It's like you don't have enough, and then you're less likely to actually see the good things.
100%. You're like manifesting this,
Yeah.
this self-fulfilling prophecy. And that leads to, this is going to sound counterintuitive, maybe, cultivating play and rest. Letting go of exhaustion as a status symbol and productivity as self-worth. Right.
Okay, wait, hold on. I need to take notes on this one. This is me. I'm like, look how busy and exhausted I am, therefore I am worthy. Tell me more about this play and rest thing. What does she say?
Okay, so play, right? It's not just about having fun, although that's important.
Yeah.
It's actually essential for like our well-being. She found that even little bursts of play, just a few minutes, can like significantly reduce stress hormones and can really boost your creative problem-solving skills.
So it's like play is actually good for your brain.
Yes. It fuels creativity, your resilience, even your relationships. And then there's rest, right? She totally challenges this idea that sleep is a luxury or that like being exhausted is like a badge of honor, right? That it equals productivity.
Which is so like the opposite of how most of us operate today.
Right. It's like this obsession with busyness. And she really thinks it might be stopping us from experiencing real joy. It's like we're so busy chasing something we miss out on, right now.
Running, but getting nowhere.
Totally. And her work is all about encouraging us to step off that hamster wheel and really examine these cultural messages we get about being busy all the time.
Well, let's talk more about those messages because we keep bumping into them, right? Like authenticity, letting go of what people think. Sounds good, but it's easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. It's a process, for sure. And I think it starts with noticing those messages, like you have to be perfect to be loved or belong, right?
Yeah.
But her research says that perfectionism is like the biggest roadblock to wholehearted living there is.
Because it keeps you so small, right? You're afraid to mess up or show your true self because people might judge you.
Totally. And what's interesting is she found this connection between perfectionism and control. So when you're striving for perfection, you're really trying to control how people see you.
Which, of course, makes you feel even more out of control because perfect doesn't exist.
Exactly. And then we beat ourselves up for not achieving something that was impossible in the first place. It's like a recipe for shame and self-doubt and just feeling disconnected.
And that's where the self-compassion comes in, right? Like treating yourself how you would treat a friend.
Yes, being kind to yourself. Because when you can do that, when you can be compassionate with yourself, then you can start to let go of that need for perfection and actually embrace the imperfections, embrace those vulnerabilities.
Which then makes you more willing to actually take a risk.
Right.
And maybe that's the key to this wholehearted living.
It's a huge piece of it, for sure. And it's a journey. It's not, you arrive and you're done. It's about trying to live your values. And, speaking of challenging norms, Brown has some really interesting stuff to say about success and what it means to have it all.
Oh, we could do a whole other deep dive on just that. But let's maybe circle back to something we talked about earlier, gratitude. You mentioned a connection to anxiety and how that impacts our ability to experience gratitude and joy.
Oh, yeah. It seems so obvious, but it's huge. Brown talks about how when you're living from this place of scarcity, your focus is always on what you don't have, what's missing, what you haven't done.
And that just creates more anxiety, more dissatisfaction. It's a vicious cycle.
Totally. But her research is really cool. It shows that when you actually make an effort to cultivate gratitude, you literally change your brain. Like you rewire it to see the good stuff. And then that opens you up to experience more joy and be more content.
Oh, wow. So it's not enough to just feel grateful when things are good. You have to actually choose to focus on it.
You got it. It's a choice. And it doesn't mean you ignore the hard things. It just means you're also making space to see the good, even if it's hard.
It's about changing your perspective. And that makes me think about something else you said. Joy is about the present, not about achieving some future thing.
That's so important. And she actually calls this foreboding joy.
Yeah.
It's like we sabotage our own happiness, because we're so worried about what might go wrong or we're stuck in the past.
And we miss out on now, which is really all we have.
That's it. That's all we got. And, that brings us back to rest and play, right? These aren't just frivolous things. They actually help us stay present and connect with ourselves, connect with others, and find that sense of joy and wonder that's so important.
Okay, we have covered so much ground. We talked about shame resilience and authenticity and letting go of being perfect and gratitude and joy and rest and play. It feels like these are all connected like threads in this big tapestry of a good life.
They are all so connected. And I think, honestly, the thing that ties it all together is courage. The courage to be vulnerable, the courage to be yourself even when it's hard, the courage to choose joy and rest even when everyone else is telling you to hustle, hustle, hustle.
So it's not just about understanding it, right? It's about actually living it, which takes courage. Yeah.
It does. It does. And I think what's so powerful about Brown's work is that she gives us both. She gives us the what and she gives us the how.
She's saying, here's the path. Are you brave enough to walk it? It does. It takes a lot of courage to really look at those beliefs that we have and challenge them, right?
Yeah.
But the reward is huge, right? If you can actually live a more authentic life, that's got to be amazing.
Absolutely. And it's about really owning your truth, right?
Yeah.
This is who I am, imperfections and all, and that's enough. And she asked this really great question in the book. It kind of sums up this whole idea, what makes you come alive?
Wow. That is a powerful question. It's so simple, but it gets right to the core of what matters.
It does. It really does. And I think when you can answer that honestly without judgment, it can be like a light bulb moment,
Yeah.
Because often it's those things that we've pushed down or told ourselves aren't realistic that really light us up.
Like we've buried them under, self-doubt and what we think we should be doing.
100%. So then it's like, okay, how do we dig those things out? How do we actually make time for those things that bring us joy?
So it's not about like making these huge changes, right? It's about finding the little ways to bring a little bit of that back into your life.
Yes. It could be as simple as like, I don't know, picking up that hobby you loved or calling that friend that always makes you laugh. Or even just like actually being present for those little moments that we usually just rush through.
Because those little moments are actually really the big moments, aren't they?
They are. And when you start to like really appreciate those moments, it changes everything.
You start to see things differently. It's like what we were talking about before, right? With gratitude, it's all about perspective.
It is. It all ties together. And that's what's so great about her work. She takes these things, shame, authenticity, gratitude, joy, rest, play, all these things we've been talking about, and she shows us how they all fit together to create a good life.
And it's a good reminder that none of us have it figured out, right? We're all just figuring it out as we go.
Exactly. Exactly. Be kind to yourself. Let yourself be vulnerable. And never, never stop looking for what lights you up. That's what matters.
That is a beautiful place to end. Thank you so much for this deep dive. It's been amazing to explore these ideas with you, and I hope that everyone listening feels inspired to embrace their own journey of wholehearted living.